Okay, so we are on Daf 140, Kof Mem. The main topic is food preparation on Shabbat, different cases of sifting and soaking and kneading. In the middle, we'll see a long series of personal advice by Rav Chisda about economic matters and marriage and all kinds of interesting things. That will be the second side of the Daf. So we start off with mustard. The Mishnah said you can put an egg in a mustard strainer that would separate the yolk, which would go through faster than the egg white. The main reason you're separating the egg and the white is not to make a sponge cake, but rather to get a yolk as a food coloring, make it whatever it is more yellow. And so the rest of it, the egg white is still edible. So you're not really separating, it's not bored because you're going to end up eating both. You just need the yolk for the time being. And so that's why that is permitted. Okay, on the subject, we mentioned a mustard strainer. So now we're going to talk a little bit about actually making mustard. It seems that the process was taking mustard seeds and mixing them with water and kneading it into some kind of dough, which would be a problem of kneading. So that has to be done before Shabbat. But then on Shabbat, taking this mass and then letting it seep or dissolve, that's what we're talking about now. So if you did prepare this mustard mass before Shabbat, then Rav says you can dissolve it in wine or water, and you can do it with a vessel, but not by hand. It seems that usually you would do it by hand, and that would come out better. And so Shabbat, you have to do it in a different way, so you have to use a vessel. Amar Shemuel, he's going to say the opposite. What do you mean? All week long you do it by hand? Is this animal food? Animal food you prepare by hand, but human food you use a vessel. So on Shabbat, you do the opposite. During the week, you use a vessel. On Shabbat, you can dissolve it and swish it around in the water or vinegar with your hands, but not with a vessel. Okay, we have two opinions. We're going to see two more about the same topic. Itmar Rabbi Elazar Amar echad zeh v'echad zeh asur. Rabbi Yochanan Amar echad zeh v'echad zeh mutar. Rabbi Elazar says permits both by hand and with a vessel. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar prohibits in both ways. Rabbi Yochanan permits both by hand and with a vessel. So now we have all four permutations. Okay, what's the halacha? Rava Abaye v'Rava Amret Harvayu and halacha Rabbi Yochanan. They don't say who halacha is like, but it's not like Rabbi Yochanan who says anything is allowed. No, something is prohibited. Turns out, Kam Rabbi Yochanan b'shitateh de Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan actually changed his mind, and he went from one extreme to the other. He used to say everything's allowed, and then he changed his mind to say everything is not allowed, like Rabbi Elazar. And Rabbi Elazar himself changed his mind. He became more mekel. Kam Rabbi Elazar b'shitateh de Shmuel. He decided, like Shmuel, who said you can do it by hand, but not with a vessel. Okay, so everybody's changing their minds. And Abaye v'Rava, now they say, before they say this against Rabbi Yochanan, now they say halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. Well, they didn't necessarily change their mind. It's Rabbi Yochanan that changed his mind. So when you read this, it sounds like at first Abaye v'Rava heard what Rabbi Yochanan first said, and it says halacha is not like that. Then Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind, and they heard about that. And then they said, okay, now halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. I think there's a chronological issue here because Abaye and Rava are fourth generation Amorim, Rabbi Yochanan is like first, second generation. I don't think, he lived a long time, but I don't think long enough for them to have met and have, had time to change his mind as well. So it would seem that perhaps first Abaye and Rava heard the early tradition and they said halacha. Then at some point they heard the later tradition after that Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind. Either that or Abaye and Rava said what the content of the halacha is, and then depending on what we think Rabbi Yochanan said, we apply their words that halacha is not like him or halacha is like him. Okay, so that's the chronological thing. But anyway, now we have a few stories about this people making this mustard preparation. Some people ate it, some people didn't. The mother of Abaye, although we saw that he was an orphan, so this is the mother who brought him up. She made it for him, and Abaye would not eat it. Well, okay, that makes sense because Abaye just said that he's mahmir. So the mother, the wife of Zeira, made it for her husband's student, and the student would not eat. And then, so the teacher's wife said, for your master, in other words, her husband, I made this, and he eats it. He eats it. You're more stringent than your own teacher. Another story, Rava says, I was in front of Rabina, and they made this mustard for him with a garlic stalk, and he ate it. I guess with the garlic stalk, I guess that's kind of like with a utensil. Amar Muzutra, here's the last word about this. Let halacha kechol haneshama tata ela kihadi itmar hardal shelashom erev Shabbat macha macho ben bayad ben bakeli ve'oten letocho devash ve'lo yitrof ela me'arev. Says not halacha is not like any of the opinions we just read, but rather you're allowed to do it on Shabbat, both with the utensil and by hand, and you can also put honey in it. As the point is, don't beat it forcefully. That will be like kneading. Rather, just mix it gently, and then it's okay. All right, a couple of more items like that are similar halacha about food preparation and mixing but not beating. If cress that you chopped before Shabbat, so on Shabbat itself, you can mix in wine and vinegar. And you could put mint in it, and just don't beat it, just mix it slowly. And similarly, garlic that you crushed before Shabbat. On Shabbat, you can put beans and grits in it, but just don't pound it together, but mix it softly. And then you could put the amita, which is mint. My amita, ninya. Mita is not. I like this phrase. Abaye says, I can learn from here that a new recipe, right? A good recipe that is good to add mint, and that would taste good. Okay, that's his conclusion from all this halachic discussion. He knows how to make this dish better. Okay, Mishnah said that you're allowed to prepare this drink that was very difficult to prepare, and we saw one of the opinions is that you can only make as little as you need, or as many as there are guests, because it's so a process. So to make, so we don't want people to work too hard on Shabbat, but it is allowed to make it. You can make this, but what you cannot make is this aluntit, which is a medicine. It's only drank for medicinal purposes, and therefore that's a general prohibition against preparing it. Vezohi anumlin, vezohi aluntit. We're talking about recipes. What is the recipe for each of these items? Anumlin, yain udevash upilpilin. You put wine and honey and pepper. Sounds delicious. Aluntit, yain, yashan, umayim selulin, va'afar semon. For the medical one, you put aged wine, water, and balsam. I guess it wouldn't taste quite as good. What is it good for? This second one, the aluntit. It's if someone is very hot from the bathhouse, you use this to cool down. And we have a story here that proves that it works. Amar of Yosef zimna hada alit batar mor ugva lebe bani. Yosef went with Mor Ukva. Mor Ukva was the first generation Amora in Bavel, and he was also the Resh Galuta. So he had a lot of, he was very rich, very powerful person. Kinafki atay lashkiyan hamra had kasa behashi mibinta derashi va tufra dechari. When I went out, they gave me this wine to drink, this wine mixture, and I felt the chill from the hairs of my head down to the toenails of my feet, right? In other words, I cooled off right away. Biashkeyan kasa harina, havai mistapina dilma menakuli mezichuta de alma deate. If they would have given me a second one, it would have been so enjoyable. I would be afraid that I would lose my merit in the world to come. Right? In other words, there's so much enjoyment one has coming to him, and he prefers to get it in the world to come. The enjoyment, the refreshing feeling from drinking this would be equivalent. I guess you could say it was heavenly. Okay. Hold on, Mar Ukva would drink this aluntit every day, right? So, how did he handle all this great refreshing feeling? Mar Ukva was so used to it, like anything, like any drug or alcohol or anything that you get used to becomes less effective. And so he had it so often, so he was not overwhelmed by how refreshing it was. Okay, good. So next Mishnah, more about preparing items, food items. And shodin tacheltit beposhrin. This chiltit is this here a flour that they would put in water, perhaps for medicinal purposes. So you're not allowed to put it into warm water. But you can put it in vinegar. Difference is when you put it in warm water, that's to prepare a medicine. But putting it in vinegar, that would be like a dip that you dip vegetables in it. So that's the general rule. If there's something that even regular healthy people would normally eat, then anyone can have it, even if someone needs it for medicine. But something that is only used as medicinally, one cannot prepare. So that's the problem with the water here. You can't soak vetches. That is a type of bean, and the chaff of the bean would be used for animal food. And so you can't soak it in water, because then the chaff would rise to the top, and that would be a way of separating the human edible part from the animal edible part that would rise to the top. You also can't rub them to rub off the skin, rub off the chaff. That would also be okay. So you can't do that on Shabbat. So similarly, putting straw in a sieve, separate it, or putting it in a high place, and then the chaff would blow away from the wind. All that is separating. But if you want to use a sieve simply as storage or to transfer the straw, that you're allowed, because there your main goal is just to be moving it, to hold it, and not to be separating. So if some separating happens by itself, that's not your main purpose, and therefore it's allowed. Okay, now we're going to ask, similar to the same question we asked yesterday. Shara mai, what if you did do it? If you did soak this asafotida in water, what is it? Doraita, Rabanan, Tirgema Rabadan Arsha'a, Kamed Rav Yosef, Shara Chayab Hatat. Rabada Mitargem, he explained it in front of Rav Yosef, his teacher, and he said that if you did soak these flowers, then that is chayav, chatat. In other words, it's asur mideoraita. Says, why are you saying it's chayav chatat, asur mideoraita? What's the problem? If I take a piece of meat and put it in water, is that liable? Obviously not. So he's comparing it to the simple case. Like what's the problem? Why? What doraita could he possibly be violating? There's only a drabanan. I mean, we said that it's because of preparing a medicine, but even preparing a medicine is only drabanan because you might come to crush something. Or he's saying this is a weekday type of activity, as we say in halab. It's not Shabbistic. Okay, so he says only drabanan. Rabbi Yochanan is early, first and second generation. Rabbi Yanai is even earlier, first generation or transition generation. The Mishnah said you can't put it in warm water, but how about soaking it in cold water? Would that be allowed? Okay, Rabbi Yanai says it's not allowed. Rabbi Yochanan counters, Va'anan tenan, and shorin tachlitit beposhrin, habesonen mutar. Mishnah said you can't put it in warm water. So can I infer from that cold water is okay? Otherwise, the Mishnah should have said you can't put it in any water at all. Seems like a good point Rabbi Yochanan is making. Rabbi Yanai says, Im ken, ma ben li velach. It says, what's the difference between you and me? Right? In other words, I know that, well, you don't think I know the Mishnah? I know the Mishnah also. So what's the point of asking me? So Rabbi Yanai is so early that actually he can argue with the Mishnah. So he says as follows: Matnitin yichida ahi detanya en shorin etachlatit lo bechamin v'lo besonen. Rabbi Yosef omer bechamin asur besonen mutar. So to be a nice counter is that you're quoting the Mishnah. It's true, the Mishnah, according to the Mishnah, you're right. It says warm water, cold water would not be allowed. But there is a baraita, which is earlier than the Mishnah, which has two opinions. And the first opinion says, not in warm and not in cold. That's what the Mishnah says. That's your opinion. But there's a minority opinion in the baraita that says, according to the Bioseh, Tosefta actually, bechamin asur besonen mutar. And that's what I'm following. I think that halacha should be like a Bioseh, and therefore should be allowed in cold water. I think this is a really interesting story, even if the content is not so relevant, but the process here. What you see is that in this early, first generation, the Mishnah had just been compiled by the Yehuda Nasi and wasn't yet considered authoritative by all of the sages. Rabbi Yochanan studied with the Yehuda Nasi. He says, "Oh, the Mishnah says." But Rabbi Yanai, who was around, who remembers before there was a Mishnah, he says, "I'll look at all the Baraitot, and I find this minority opinion." Right, so what happened here is that we have the Baraita first. It has Tanakama Rabbi Yosef, and the Mishnah, the Yehuda Nasi, agrees with the Tanakama, and so he cites only the Takama and says, I'm sorry, opposite, that he agrees with the Bioseh, right? The Yehuda Nasi agrees with the Bioseh, and so cites the Bioseh's opinion that says warm water is not allowed, and he cites only that opinion as the majority and leaves out the other one. And so that's why the Yochanan says that's what we should follow. The Yanai says, hold on, I know the original Baraita, and the original Baraita, what you spread in the Mishnah is only a Dat Yachid, the minority opinion of the Bioseh. I follow the majority opinion, and for that reason, I am more Mahmir. Okay, so you can see here, the development, the early days of the Mishnah, when it was not yet considered authoritative by everyone. Okay, now lemay avdile leukra deliba. What is this? Is the soaked asafotida good for? It's good for heaviness of the heart, right? Heart stress, chest pain. Let's call it. Rabacha bar Yosef chash beukra deliba. And one time Rabacha bar Yosef had some chest pain. Atal kamed morukba. Morikva, we saw already, he was the Resh Galuta, the exilarch. He says, here's what you need to do. Go and drink 3 coin worths of this mixture every day in 3 days, right, altogether. In other words, 1 shekel worth each day. Drink it for 3 days, and then you'll feel better. So he went, he drank that much on Thursday and on Friday. And then on Shabbat, he wasn't sure if this is allowed. So the Safrash Azal Sha'il Be Midrasha. So he went and asked in the Bet Midrash. Amrule Tana Debe Rabbi Rab Ada. Amrila Tana Debe Mor Bar Rab Ada. Shote Adam Kab O Kabayim Veno Choshesh. So the Bet Midrash, they told him, yeah, we learned there's no problem. You can even have this large amount of this drink, and it's drunk by healthy people too, so it's okay, it's totally fine. So I wasn't asking about drinking. I know it's allowed to drink. I'm asking about preparing it. Can I put these flowers in the water? And so, and the Midrash, the Bechia Barabin says, this happened to me actually, and I asked and he didn't know the answer. And then I went and I asked Rav Huna, Amar Rav Shoreh besonen umaneh b'chama. And I've had a workaround. Says you soak it in cold water and you leave it out in the sun. And that way the sun will warm it up and you will get the proper preparation. Okay, so there you go. So you see from the story that he allowed in cold water. So we say, Keman deshareh. Oh, it seems that Rav is only following the permitted opinion, right? The opinion of Rabbi Yosef and of the Mishnah. So is that true? He only follows that opinion? And we say no. It can even be according to the other opinion, the Tanakama and the Bianai, who say it's asur. When they say you're not allowed to put it into cold water or warm water, right? That is only if you hadn't drunk at all. If you didn't start the process, you didn't start the medication, then you cannot start it with a preparation on Shabbat. But in this case, since you started the medication already on Thursday and Friday, if you stop it now and don't drink it today, it will be dangerous. Therefore, you must drink it and you're allowed to prepare it. It's kind of like taking antibiotics, right? Once you start taking antibiotics, you shouldn't take it just for 2-3 days. You got to finish the whole dose. Otherwise, it can actually get worse than if you didn't take any at all. Okay, good. Mistamech ve'azir Rabacha bar Yosef HaKatfeh, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak bar Achateh. Okay, that story was about Rabacha bar Yosef. And now another incident about him. When he was old, he was walking and leaning on the shoulder of his nephew, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Amar le kimaten lebed Rav Safra ailina. So Rabacha said, when we get to the house of Rav Sifra, I want to go in. Let me in. So they got there, and he helped them into the door. And so only the uncle goes in. Question is, when you have a linen shirt that was newly laundered, it's very stiff. I guess they didn't have fabric softener back then. And so people would rub it in order to make it soft. Are you allowed to do that on Shabbat? The problem is it makes it soft, which is fine, but it also makes it more white when you do that. Something about the process makes it more white, and that would be like cleaning. What's most people's primary intention? Is it to soften, then it'll be okay, or to whiten, and then it'll be a problem? So Rav Safra is there, and he answers, most people's intention is to soften it, and so it is permitted. Okay, good. When he came out, the nephew asks, what question did you have? I asked him, can you rub a new shirt? And he said, a newly laundered shirt. He said, yes, it's okay. So he said, why did you ask about a shirt? Why didn't you ask about a kerchief, a scarf? I didn't ask about a kerchief because I already asked that question to Rav Huna, and he told me it's allowed. So Rav Nachman says, well then, if you already knew that a kerchief is allowed, why did you bother asking about a shirt? Why didn't you assume that it's the same law? In that case, with a scarf, this is different, right? The case is with a scarf, it doesn't appear that you're making it white. People don't care if their scarf is so white. But with the case of a shirt, then that looks like the primary reason people want their shirt to be nice and bright. Okay, there's another version of this where it's the opposite, where Rav Huna said the scarf is not allowed. And then it's the opposite, that the scarf that you wear on your head, you want it to be nice and bright, but a shirt that you wear under a jacket, you don't care if it's so bright. Okay, anyway, this one, this follows Zarif, seems simple. Okay.
Why did we seek Reshe?
It's definitely going to happen. Well, I don't know if it's definitely going to happen. I'm not sure how the process works. It's not like a stain that's coming out and being cleaned. So I don't know if it's precisely like laundering, coloring. It's, just a slightly different shade. Yeah, it's a good question. And even if it is, all right, pasik rasher, we saw in some cases that would be allowed. All right. So Amar Rav Chisda, Hai kitanita, meshafu ledida mekanya share, kanya mimena asur. Amar Abayim keli kevaihu mutar. Okay, Rav Chisda says this linen shirt, can you remove it from the launder? They would put it on a hanger, but they didn't have real hangers. They just put it on a stick. A stick is mukseh. You're going to use it as firewood after. So, and it's mukseh mechamat gufo. So you can't take the stick and remove it. But what you can do is take the shirt off of the stick, and then if it moves indirectly, that would be okay. And Rava adds, if it's a weaver's vessel, in other words, if it's an official utensil, then even if it's mukseh mechamat isur, that only the weaver uses it, but still in that case it would be allowed because you can move plisha melachto leisur for if you need the space, and so then in that case that would be okay. Okay, now that we started with Rav Chisda, we're going to have a few more items, a whole bunch of traditions that Rav Chisda teaches, mostly just like common sense, nice advice. Amar Rav Chisda, Hai kishta de yarka, ichazia lemachal behema shadil taltule ila asira. If you have a bunch of vegetables, if an animal can eat it, then it's not mukseh because it's good for the animal. But otherwise, it is mukseh. If you have hanging meat, this is how they used to, still today, they hang meat. If you have it on this meat on a hook, you're allowed to move it because even though it's not cooked, it's raw, but it could be raw. They used to eat some raw meat. However, it's made out of fish, then you can't move it because nobody would eat raw fish. Now today is mostly the opposite. We eat raw fish, but not raw meat. Amarav ketina omed be'emsa mita kilo omed be'keresa shel isha velav mileta hi. If standing in the middle of someone's bed is like standing on the womb of a woman. In other words, when even the halacha is like a man should not rest on his wife's bed when they're nidah, because then that will think of him, cause her to think of her. And then they rejects it. There's no la miltai. Don't worry about that. Amar Chisda bar be'rav desabin yarkal is ben aricha kisha ki kisha urcha mimela. Some good advice: when you go to the market and you're buying vegetables, buy the longest one, right? Because the bundle is the same. In other words, the thickness is the same, and for the same price, you're getting longer. You're getting a little bit, some more celery. You get the longest bundle. I guess they didn't do it by weight. They just, by the bunch. Amar Chisda bar be'rav desabin kanya is ben aricha tuna ki tuna v'urka mimela. And similarly, you buy reeds, buy the longest one because the bundle is always the same, and the longer you get, the better. A little more for free. Amar Chisda bar be'rav de la nafisha le'rifta la'ach lechul yarka. If you're a student who's poor and doesn't have a lot of bread, don't eat a lot of vegetables. Mishum de garir, because vegetables are an appetizer and they're going to make you hungry, and then you're not going to have so much bread and you're going to stay hungry. So better don't have any of the vegetable appetizers, and then just eat whatever bread you have. You'll be less hungry. And he says he himself, when I was poor, I did not eat vegetables, and when I'm old, I also did not eat these appetizing vegetables. When I was poor because I didn't want to work up an appetite when I didn't have enough food to fill it. When I was rich, I said, why should I eat vegetables when I can eat meat and fish instead? Why should I fill up my my stomach with veggies when I can have more substantive food? Okay. Well, you can Right, he's being frugal, but why not? If you're going to get a good deal, why not? A student who does not have much bread, don't cut it into thin slices. Rather, kind of wait up till you have a nice meal. Rather than eat a little bit at a time, have one nice meal. At least you'll feel full, once a day. If you're eating together with lots of people, then don't, and if you're poor, don't be the one to break the bread for everybody else. Because then he's going to be stingy. He's going to be afraid that he's not getting enough, and he's hungry, and he's not going to give everybody out give it out in a generous way. That's the same reason we say Ba'al Habayit Boseya, right? When you have guests in your house, the host should give out, because the host is happy to give everybody a lot. Whereas if you're a guest, who am I as a guest to go give someone else's food out and generously? Okay, so Chrystus says, actually, I would never break bread unless I went and I looked at all the food and I saw there was enough bread for everyone, including me. Then I felt comfortable, and then I would give it out in a generous way, and so then I would be the host. It says, if you're okay with eating barley bread, which was usually eaten by animals or poor people, and you eat wheat bread, which is finer, then you violate Baal Tashrit. You're wasting. In other words, why are you getting the more expensive, spending more money when you're perfectly fine with the cheap version? This could be applied to everything. If you're okay with using the generic brand of toilet paper or medicine or whatever, and you're fine with it, then you spend extra money for no reason on the name brand, then you're just wasting money. And so that's tashrit. Similarly, if you're fine with cheaper beer and you go and buy expensive wine, so why are you spending extra? You're just wasting. But the Talmud says does not agree. And it says that we saw this line before, that destruction of food is bad, but destruction of your own body is even worse. And therefore, wheat bread and finer wine is healthier, and therefore it's okay to spend on the item that is healthier, even if you yourself, don't care. It tastes the same to you, but it's not a bad idea to spend more on healthier, because then you're not wasting your own health. If a student is poor, doesn't have oil, so he should use ditch water. The scum, the seaweed, what do you call it? The algae growing in it is similar to oil. It sounds gross, but it's good for your skin. If you're going to buy meat, you should buy the neck of the animal, because the neck has 3 different types of meat that have 3 different tastes, so you get 3 cuts for the price of 1. If you're going to buy a linen shirt, go back to the linen shirts, you should buy it from the manufacturers by the Abba River. There's expensive shirts there. And wash it once every 30 days. And if you do that, it'll last you the whole year. I will guarantee it, right? Or your money back. So I guess the point is that although this is a more expensive shirt, it's worth it to spend on something that's quality, because it will last you longer, and in the end will be a good deal. My kitonita, and kitonita, we call it that because it's fine class stuff, and you'll be fashionable when you wear it. A student should not give his clothes to his host. Be staying by someone to wash. Don't sit on a new mat made out of hemp, because the new mat is damp and it will ruin his garments. So he also said, if you're staying by someone, don't give your dirty clothes to your host to wash for him. It's not polite. Perhaps the host will see some dirt on it, some seminal emission, and will say, oh, look at this gross person. And so don't do that. So now some advice that Rav Chisda gave to his daughters. Always be modest before your husbands. Don't eat bread in front of your husbands. This is like, on dates, every girl knows you're not allowed to eat a lot on dates, so it'll scare off the guy. After you get married, but it's okay. Also, don't eat vegetables at night. It'll cause bad breath. Also, don't drink beer. Don't have dates and don't drink beer. And don't relieve yourself in the same place, because then they're going to see, they're going to realize that you're human and that you have, excrement, and they're going to be disgusted. Go to a separate place that they should think you're angelic. If someone knocks on the door, answer in the masculine form. Answer in the feminine form, not the masculine form. That way, if it's a man at the other side who's knocking on the door, he'll get the message that not to be flirtatious. Rav Chisda, he would put a pearl in one hand and a clod of earth in the other hand. And he would show them the pearl and keep the other hand closed. And the daughters would say, what's another hand? We want to see. And then he showed them, it's just a clod of dirt. What's the point? They should always dress modestly, because people are always interested in something that they can't see better than something that's revealed. Okay, I don't know if he was calling his daughters clods of dirt, but I think his point was, even if you're pretty, you're that much more, the guys will be that much more interested if you're dressed modestly. Okay, and back to the Mishnah, and Sholin the Kashinin, now you can't soak those vetches, those beans, and then let the chaff rise to the top. That's separating. This is not follow the Baraita that says you don't have to, that you can't use a sieve at all. We saw in the Mishnah it says you can't put it in a sieve on purpose, but you could use a sieve as a tool just to move it around, because that's not your main intention. And he says, no, do not use a sieve at all, even if it's just for storing or for moving the items around. Okay, and now Mishnah will just begin discussion of this Mishnah today. So there's two kinds of oxen. One is called the petam. That's one that is being fattened up, and so you keep it in a stall to get fat. And the other one is seems to me that's right. It goes and grazes. So gorfin, you're allowed to sweep out the garbage in front of the one that's being fattened, and you can also sweep out the garbage. You could not sweep it out, but move it to the side for an animal that grazes. The animal that grazes will eat more things. The one that's being fattened up is more finicky in what it eats, so therefore you can take the garbage and send it out altogether. Hachamim say, no, you cannot move it out, that's mukseh. What you're allowed to do is everyone agrees that you're allowed to take some hay from this animal and move it give it to the other animal. See, Rabbi Dosa said two cases, one about the fattening animal for being fattened and one about the grazing animal. Hachamim say not allowed. Which one are they disagreeing with? The case of the first case, second case, or they disagree with both cases? They say both this and both that, you're not allowed to move it. So you see that they're arguing on both cases. When the trough is in the ground, that's what they're arguing about. But if the trough is a vessel, then everyone agrees that you're allowed to move the food around and move out the garbage. That's okay. Hold on, one that's in the ground is. Does anyone think that the one in the ground is allowed? When it's in the ground, in a hole in the ground, and then you push things from side to side, you are leveling in the ground. If it's outdoors, that's plowing. If it's indoors, that's called building. Rather, this is what Rav Chisda must have meant to say. They argue only on if it's a utensil. But if the trough is a hole in the ground, then everyone would agree that it's not allowed. And so you can give it from one animal and move the hay and give it to the other animal. We have two, but I thought that seem to contradict, but actually they don't contradict. One says, one says you can take from the animal that has a good mouth and give it to one that has a bad mouth. We'll see what these terms mean. And the other one says the opposite. You can take one that has a bad mouth and give it to the animal that has a good mouth. They both of these Baratot are saying the same thing, that you're allowed to take hay from a donkey and give it to an ox. But from an ox and give it to a donkey, not allowed. Now, what do we mean by good mouth and bad mouth? Actually, they both apply to each animal. When we say a nice mouth, that's talking about a donkey. Don't take away from a donkey because the donkey does not drool when it eats. And you can give it to one that has a bad mouth, that's the cow, because it drools. And so the point is that you can take it from the donkey because it's not ruining the food because it doesn't drool. So the food is still good. You give it to the cow and the cow will still eat it. But not the other way around because the cow will drool all over it and then the donkey is not going to want to eat it. And that which we say, take it from the one that has a bad mouth, that also is referring to the donkey, has a bad mouth in the sense that it eats anything, it doesn't care. So you can take it from it, and give it to, and give it to the cow. The cow has a finer palate and will only eat certain things. That's why it has a good mouth. So you want to take it from the donkey. If a donkey would eat it, for sure the cow would eat it. But if the cow would eat it, not necessarily if the donkey would eat it. And so therefore you're allowed to move food that is edible, and even to the level of is it edible for this animal or for that animal, then you could also move it. So we have a lot of laws about preparation of different foods, and especially lots of great advice from Rav Chisda. The next time you go shopping, right, remember to look for a good deal.